Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Post-creepy and true stories. I'll start. In the mid-'80s, my mum was a cleaner in Australia. She would clean houses in suburban areas and would sometimes do houses in rural wine regions. We lived near both. She would leave business cards at the local shops and got most of her business this way, and some through referrals and word of mouth. One day, she got a call from a lady who sounded like she was around 60, asking Mum to clean her old farmhouse. She made a lot of odd demands, and Mum would usually meet clients before taking on new business. In this case, the lady did not want to meet Mum and said she would leave the keys under the front doormat. Mum agreed mainly because the lady was quite obviously wealthy and was offering to pay Mum substantially more than she would reasonably expect. Mum went to the house on a Monday morning and said she already felt unnerved by the long driveway. The house was essentially in the middle of a very large and very empty property. She found the keys and started cleaning. About an hour into the clean, she hears the back door shut. Mum was told no one would be at the house, so she immediately felt unsafe. She stood frozen in the kitchen for what she said felt like 4 minutes, although she said it could have been much longer. There was no other car on the property. She wanted to leave immediately, but had 2 rooms left to do. Both were bedrooms. She said as time passed and she heard nothing else, she decided that perhaps it was nothing, or perhaps something had fallen, and it wasn't the door after all. She walked up the hallway and stepped into the bedroom. All over the bed were black and white photos. As Mum got closer, she realized the photos were all of her. Some were taken at our family home, and many others were taken at other houses Mum would clean. Some through windows or over fences. She used the house phone to call the police and immediately drive to the end of the driveway.
So let me tell you the story about my old dead grandaunt Agnes. Her full name was Agony Joseph Mahane, for those wondering. She died sometime in March 1972 in Newfoundland, Canada, 20 years before I was born. From what I've been told, she's a crazy lady. Not literally batshit insane, but she was an old senile loon living in a rural hamlet and used to threaten people with guns and shit. She lived in a house that looked something like Pick-related, with my grandmother, her sister, and my father and his brother. She kicked the bucket in '72, but my grandmother, father, and his brother kept on living in it, and everything was fine. Nothing too spooky going on until 1988 when my father brought home his girlfriend, my mother. My mother went to sleep on the bed and woke up in the morning feeling paralyzed like sleep paralysis, and saw an apparition of an old lady floating above her, staring into her eyes with the most hateful glare, like an aunt saying, "Get out of my nephew's house," or something along those lines. My mother screamed. Everybody woke up to check her out. The apparition disappeared, and the description my mother gave the family was similar to my aunt. Every time my mother came back to that house, spooky shit would happen to her, so my father moved out with her to find a new house, and my grandmother and my father's brother moved elsewhere too. Fast forward to 1992 when my mother was about to go into labor. She passed out in pain in the ambulance, and for a second she saw a fleeting image of my great-aunt Agnes at her side. I was born, and to this day my mother and father say I have my aunt's eyes. Fast forward to now, the house is still there. It's not the house in the Pick, it looks somewhat similar. But given how most people in Newfoundland are moving to the big cities, it's been abandoned since my family moved out. I'm afraid to go there. I'm afraid I'll meet my spooky, crazy ghost aunt.
I'll bite. It's not really paranormal, but it's true and creepy. Gonna Greentext for time's sake. A few years ago. Homeless heroin addict. Squatting in the basement of a recently foreclosed 2-family home. Go to score like any other morning. My usual dealer is not in his trap. Someone new is there. Don't care. Buy my dope and leave. Get back to my squat and my friend is there. I went to pick up for both of us. Always take a taste of the product before I bang it, just to check the potency. Lick finger, put it in bag, lick finger again. It's not dope. Begin to get lightheaded and really hot. Feels like I'm dying. Friend freaks out and tries to get me to drink some water. Pass out and wake up later feeling dope sick and my throat's on fire. Friend buried the dope. Said he thought I died since I stopped breathing. Find a new place to pick up. I wish it was cooler and more dramatic, but it's not. I think the dope was poisoned with something. Word got out that a bunch of addicts OD'd, but we all knew the difference. One of the reasons why I stopped.
Amanda is my brother's girlfriend. At the time of this story, she was looking for her first apartment and moving out from her parents' house. Her and my brother didn't want to move in together since they had only dated for a few months. She opted instead to search for a roommate online. Browsing Craigslist, she found an ad titled something like, "Roommate wanted females only." This sort of thing was common since the area she was looking in was mostly young professionals. The listing was for a room in a house for about $225 a month, which was quite cheap compared to most places listed. The occupant listed herself as a 23-year-old college student that wasn't comfortable with living with any males. The other roommate would have their own room and attached bathroom. So far, Amanda was into this place. However, the listing only had a single photo from outside the property. Amanda sent an email wanting to meet the occupant and tour the house. Within 30 minutes, she receives an email back with all the details and time to stop by. The girl worked late hours and wanted Amanda to stop by at 8 p.m. When Amanda arrives, there is a handwritten note on the front door saying, "Door broken, use back door." Walking around the house, it looks nice but slightly unkempt. Tall grass, weeds, dusty windows, etc. Still no alarms for Amanda, though. When she knocks on the back door and an older man opens the door. At first, Amanda thinks she has the wrong house, but the man reassures her and says that the occupant, I forget the name, was out and he was the landlord. The occupant asked him to meet Amanda since she was working late. He seemed pleasant and offered to show her around. Alarms start going off but aren't at red alert yet. First, the guy was clearly in his 40s, unshaven, and looked like he lived in his car. Also, only the kitchen light was on. As they walked around the house, Amanda noticed one huge red flag. No furniture. Nothing. The landlord was polite about answering questions, but seemed irritable at keeping lights on for too long, rushing her around and only letting her look at rooms for a few moments. There was a single room that the landlord wouldn't open, telling her that it was the occupant's room and he didn't want to invade her privacy. As they walk down the hallway into the living room, she notices the front door has a plank nailed across it. Broken for sure. Amanda's creepometer is starting to ding, so she decides to wrap up the walkthrough and leave, but trying to be polite. As she's giving the guy her "thanks for the showing" bit, he perks up and states that he forgot to show her the basement. It's recently furnished and would be a great rec room, and she should take a look down there. At the time, Amanda and the landlord are standing in the small hallway between the front living room and the back kitchen. In this little hallway was the basement door. When he opens the door, it opens outward to create something of a barrier between Amanda and the back door. The basement is pitch black. He smiles, motions down the stairs, and says, "Ladies first." What happens next is nothing more than a stroke of luck. Amanda gets a text just as some random person parks in front of the house. Thinking on her feet, she pretends it's a phone call and answers her phone. "Hey, yeah, are you here? I'll come out from around back and let you in. It's great. You have to see it." With a motion of confidence, she excuses herself around the landlord and walks out of the back door. She says the guy just looked at her like he was confused. Once outside, she sprinted to her car and sped like hell out of there. When Amanda got home, she told her mother and my brother everything. Cops were called. They took her statement and went to investigate. The Craigslist post had been removed. Epilogue. The house had been foreclosed over 6 months earlier, and the property had been abandoned. When the police investigated, they found that the closed room the landlord didn't want her to look in was where the man had been staying. There was a pile of old dirty blankets, rotten food, and empty gallon jugs everywhere. More creepy was, he had plastered ripped-up pages from porno mags on all the walls in the room. Where do they even find porno mags? The really scary part of this was the basement. The man had tied a thin piece of fishing twine at about shin level across the stairs about halfway down. The basement was empty except another pile of old blankets, a broom handle wrapped in leather belts, and a small box with a few rolls of assorted tape, duct, electric, etc., Amanda ended up not moving in.
Okay, we never really told anyone. Be me, 21-year-old engineer. Came back to my hometown for 2 weeks of summer holidays, free from work, feels good. Hometown is a little city surrounded by nothing but lakes and woods. I decided to go for a swim with my friends, just the three of us. Get alcohol, bicycles, a lot of food, and mind you, pizza too. Day went fine, we started up a fire, got wasted and fell asleep. It gets cold quickly after the sunset, so eventually I got woken by one of my friends, feeling drunk, but we decided we better go home since it's around 10 p.m. already. Decided to stick with the drinking and play some vidya at my home. The third guy is so wasted we have to sober him up a bit before we depart. Around 11 p.m., dark, middle of the woods near the lake shore. A bit of mist here and there. Lakes, man. We leave, talking about shit like drunks do. I was talking about how I found my job when I feel something is not right and stop mid-word. Guys felt it too. We stopped and looked around. We can see the sky now, so the wood isn't too deep. Something flashed somewhere west in the sky, though I was just drunk. We laugh about being drunk and paranoid and decide to carry on riding. After 10 minutes or so, the third guy breaks and tells with the most spine-shivery voice I heard. I thought I was just drunk, but what are those flashes? Fucking 30 minutes, and he too saw those flashes we all ignored. Look at the sky, perfectly shaped circles of white lights appear one after another, blinking, staying on the sky just to disappear. They are cut out perfectly, like you know how the light gets blurry the further you are from the source. Those ignored that and appeared as perfect circles of ghastly white light. We panic and get out of the woods.
My sister's best friend used to work at a bar downtown that had no fixed opening times, and she usually got home early. Our town is quite old, and most streets are narrow. It is hard to find a parking spot in the city center. A lot of streets are one-way streets, or only accessible to workers and residents, etc. Typical European city center. Fortunately, there is a large free parking lot next to a park in the city center, built on a place that had been used as military training grounds from Roman times up to the 18th century. It's no one's favorite place. The trees are very tall and infested by hundreds of crows that cover your car in bird shit. It's near the river, so the cold wind is always blowing. No street lamps, but it's free, so every cheap car owner and student parks there. My friend usually finished working at around 7 p.m. during the week and got back to her old cheap car that was usually covered in bird shit to go home. There was an old lady with an old-fashioned hat and a long mantle who was always sitting on a bank in the middle of the parking lot almost every day. This was kind of strange, but old ladies do all kinds of weird stuff, like feed the birds or sit on banks for the whole day. Some of them even get high. The winter was coming and the days were getting shorter and shorter. In December, the sun goes down at 6 p.m. and she was always there, sitting on the bank in the middle of the parking lot, almost every day. The high trees and the absence of street lamps, the streets nearby are well equipped, but not the parking lot, made it look creepy, but the old lady was now belonging to the landscape, and no one really worried about her. One day, my friend gets out of work much later than usual, and the parking lot was rather empty. Even the old lady was not there anymore, so my friend got to her car, and to her surprise, there was someone sitting in the passenger seat. She freaked out at first, but recognized the old lady. She asked politely what the hell was going on, and the old lady said, in a weak voice, she suddenly felt cold and weak and found the nearest unlocked car and sat down. My friend didn't recall leaving her car unlocked, but it's a cheap 80s model with all kinds of malfunctions, and she might have forgotten to lock it. The old lady asks if my friend could drive her home. It was in another part of the town, but she didn't want to leave the old lady out in the cold night. They started to drive, and the old lady had taken out her mantle and her hat and seemed to feel more comfortable. As they drove through the well-lit city center, they stopped at a red light. Looking at the old lady, my friend suddenly remarked her hair looked rather strange. They started to speak about the weather, etc., and as the woman turned to speak to her, my friend clearly saw badly shaved chest hair in her cleavage. She immediately realized she was not speaking to an old lady, but to a man in disguise. She freaked out, but managed to keep her calm and stopped the car in a busy street, saying she had to call her parents to say that she would be home late because she was driving an old lady home. She didn't even live with her parents. She left the car curb plugged, disappeared from sight, and then ran into a bar and called the police. The old lady wasn't caught, but the police said the man had been spotted a few months earlier trying to play similar games in another part of town.
This is probably kind of vanilla compared to other posts, but I'll share. My house is in the middle of the woods. It's in a smallish community, so it's not just myself out there. I get done with work kind of late in the evening. Usually I get done at 10 p.m. or 11, and it's about a 45-minute drive home. On the final stretch home, there's a road I have to drive down that I've started calling Glitch Road. On an average day, the drive down Glitch Road takes about 7 minutes if you go the speed limit, which is 45. I usually do go the speed limit as I recently just got my license and am still a nervous driver. A few nights I've realized, though, that I get home much later or earlier than expected. So I've started timing my drives. Now the clock in my car is wrong, and I'm way too lazy to change it, but it records time like a normal damn clock would. When I turn onto the Glitch Road, I'll check my clock and make a note of it. Then up the drive, I'll look at landmarks I remember the most. There's an area with an older barn, then a house that was for sale for like 4 years. Across from that house is a recently built house that I'm kind of jelly of, then a really small yellow house. Later down the road there's a red Japanese-style home and another small yellow home. I remembered the road well. So I'll look at the clock, it'll say 10:50 p.m. or some shit, usually not the right time. I'll drive down Glitch Road and look for that barn to start the chain of landmarks I remember. Sometimes I don't pass the barn. I'll drive down and I'll get to the stop sign to turn onto my road, and it's been only 2 minutes, and I didn't pass the barn. Sometimes I'll pass the barn 2, 3 times, and it's been 15 minutes already, and where the hell is the stop sign to turn onto my road? The road I live on is the first stop sign on Glitch Road, several miles up it. There is no way to get turned around on this road. On several occasions I've seen someone in the woods sticking their thumb out of the tree line, like a hitchhiker. I don't ever see the guy, but I assume it's the same fellow who stands in the lawns or driveways of some of the homes I drive by. I don't know if that's connected with the driving times of the road, but it still creeps me out. Additionally, sometimes a car will come up with their lights on, and the lights will flicker out, and the car will be gone. Not like it turned into a driveway or anything, but it just goes out and the car's not there anymore. There's an additional route to get home to my house, but I live at the bottom of a very tall hill. The other route home involves me driving down that hill, and it's really dangerous to do so in the winter.
Typing from my phone, so sorry for any grammatical mistakes or whatever. Anyway, when I was in elementary school, 8th grade, I used to live in a pretty normal place here in Brazil and hang out with some of the only nerdy guys from school, plus a normie. The small city I used to live in was medium class. Some big houses, some normal. But down the street, on the way back from school, there was this one house. This one property is crammed full of plants and trees. It looks like a jungle with a house in the middle. Now people might think, herdur, isn't it like this everywhere there? It isn't. This house creeped pretty much everyone out because it stuck out so much. It was like house, 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 jungle, house, house. So this one day we were coming back from school, me plus my usual 3 friends, when the normie stopped by the house and whispered, "Holy shit, look." There was this raccoon, missing half his face, coming out of the trees in front of the house. I swear I don't know how that raccoon was still alive. He had maybe 30% of his face remaining, and the rest was all flesh and bones. You could see half his jaw hanging around, but it looked just fine, walking without a limp. Everyone gasped, and my wuss of a friend almost puked. It was pretty creepy at the time. I remember us running and pushing each other out of the way when the raccoon approached, and then we left. We walked by that house pretty often, as it was one of the roads we took back home from school. So we used to see some pretty creepy shit quite often. Another day, this was a few weeks later, I was coming home alone, and, out of curiosity, walked really slow in front of the place. Now the windows were shut with many boards, and the door, made of what looked like some slabs of wood, was painted with a really big X sort of mark. The low gate in front was rusted to all hell. You could get tetanus just by looking at it. But when I came to notice, I was just standing there staring at the house, and when I looked at the window again between the boards, I could see a face staring at me as well. I remember my heart froze then, and I walked out of there the faster I could. Until then, I always thought that place was deserted, but they said 2 twin hags lived there. Back then I thought it was just bullshit, until sometime later. A little later, I don't know how long since it's been 6 years since then, that house was like an urban legend in my circle of friends. Walking back one day with another normie, this one said to us, "You guys are seriously scared of this place. Grow up." Right there, gaining the Oscar for best horror movie cliche ever. He picked up a stick and threw it on the side of the house, way back. "I dare you guys to go pick that up, you wussies," he said. Me and the 2 other dudes, been genre savvy in that mock of a horror movie they were acting up on, said no fucking way. But the other normie punched me in the arm, called me a wuss, and went in with normie 2 to retrieve the stick. Not 5 minutes later, we heard a scream, and then the sound of leaves being trampled. It was them running for their lives to get out of there, cutting themselves on the gate on the way out. Later that day, away from the house obviously, they told me they were in the back and saw that the door opened when they got there. It was daytime, but the house was pitch black inside. In the little they saw, the house was all wrecked up, and they swear they saw one of the hags calling them in with her hand in that "come here" motion. Well, lastly, in the year I left that city, I was walking by the house to see a truck with a crane, cutting the tall trees on the property, I believe because they were messing up the power cables. By the side, the 2 twin hags, both using white gowns and long white hair, were staring fiercely at the guys in the truck. Their skin was so rugged I couldn't even see their eyes. Later that year, I moved and haven't been back all these years. I keep telling myself I'll go back to take a picture of the house. Anyway, not paranormal, but back then. Scary for 4 13-year-olds.
Had a couple of weird things happen to me. First one was when I was about 5 years old. We moved into a new house, just a regular suburban house. I started getting nosebleeds every night. I'd wake up and blood was all over my pillow and pajamas. I felt physically fine, never woke up during them, no illness or injury. Parents took me to the doctor, but he couldn't find anything wrong. This happens every night for close to a week. Eventually, my stepdad finds a little statue on the windowsill, hidden behind a curtain. Must have been left behind by the previous occupants. Can't remember what it looked like, but was about 3 inches tall and dark brown or black. They threw away the statue and the nosebleeds immediately stopped. To this day, I have no idea if it was just a coincidence or if there was something evil about that statue. The second thing wasn't anything supernatural, but scary. Was about 13 or 14. Small for my age, so maybe looked a couple years younger. Went to the local supermarket and was leaving when I really needed to use the toilet. Knew there was no way I could make it home in time, so I decided in my desperation that I would just have to use the public toilets behind the supermarket. It was about 3 p.m., and they were in a quiet spot. Not much foot traffic goes that way, just the occasional jogger. Go into the toilet. It's small, only 2 stalls and a urinal. I sit down and do my business, and I hear a small group of men walk in. First one enters the stall next to me. The other one stands outside my stall, and the other seems to be near the urinal. A couple of minutes go by. It's dead silent. Though they came in together, there is no talking, no sounds of people using the facilities. Nothing. I begin to feel uneasy, but not panicked. I notice the guy outside my stall seems to be trying to look in through the small gap between the door and side. Being a typical public toilet, the lock is broken. He tries to push my door open and I push back, letting him know it's occupied. I'm starting to become more concerned. He should have known I was in there, but still give him the benefit of the doubt. Then it happens. The guy puts his hand up under the door in my stall and starts moving it around. Now I'm in full-blown panic mode. That's no mistake. I pull my pants up. I don't give a shit. I've got to get out of here now. I don't flush and pull the door open, shove him out the way and leg it. I run outside about 20 meters and kind of stop. I look back and see a car parked outside the toilet with a fourth man sitting in it. He is watching me through the rearview mirror. The other 3 guys come out, get in the car and drive off. All I can think of is that these guys were going to try and abduct me and I got the jump on them.
This happened when I was in college. I lived in Isla Vista, the student community at UCSB, University of California. Santa Barbara is notorious for being a party school. It fully lived up to its reputation. I liked to party, but holy shit, these people were off the wall. As such, there were a lot of people who put themselves in dangerous situations, drinking to excess, not being careful, not locking doors, etc. It had a very isolated and insular vibe, and anyone who was hanging around who wasn't college-aged immediately looked out of place and strange. One night, after having a few drinks, I came home to my small house where I lived with 2 other girls, probably around 2:30 a.m. We were all serious students. I was probably the least serious, actually. And when we partied, it was not your typical UCSB mega rager, more like a small get-together with friends. We would often have a few people spend the night, sleep on our furniture, or in our beds, as the case may be. That night, my roommates had had a few people over who I didn't know, and I saw when I returned home that one of them had opted to sleep on the couch from the shadow that I saw there. I didn't turn the light, so I wouldn't wake anyone up. But as I was passing the couch to enter my bedroom, I noticed that the figure was lying very stiff. He just had this weird energy to him. He was lying down, but it was like he was putting all of his energy into lying as still and rigid as possible. I paused, and the guy quickly jerked his head to face me, but without moving his limbs so quickly that it startled me. I could see his wide-open eyes glinting in the dark. Figuring that I'd startled him, or that he was drunk, or maybe on like some kind of stimulant and unable to sleep, I just hurried past into my bedroom and locked the door. The dude made me nervous, and I wasn't taking any chances. I fell asleep. At 4:30 a.m., I woke up. There was a strange sound at the door, almost like somebody was drumming their fingers against the wood very quietly. I lay still and listened. There were more quiet sounds like someone scratching the door with their fingers, which got louder and louder until it was clear that he was using both hands and scratching as fast and as hard as possible. It created an extremely loud and intimidating sound that filled me with fear. I got my cell phone and texted my roommate because I was afraid to make a sound. "Your friend is freaking me out. Is he coked out? Can you talk to him? He's banging and scratching on my door." She didn't text me back, probably because she was asleep. I texted my other roommate to the same effect, covering all my bases. Keep in mind that the scratching has been going on at this point for a couple minutes. I have no idea how he could have sustained it. Scratching a wooden door with your fingernails can't feel good. He also grabbed at the knob and jiggled it super forcefully. Because neither of them answered, I decided to call and really wake them up, though I was scared to make a sound. I know it sounds stupid, but there was something seriously horrifying about being teased like this through the door. I knew that he was trying to terrify me. I felt like a little kid, but I could tell this guy was fucked up or something, and maybe the police needed to be called, and I wanted to loop my roommates in, since it was one of their friends. The scratching stopped abruptly, and I called my roommate, who answered sleepily. "Yo, your friend is messed up. Can you please deal with it? Do we need to call the cops? He's seriously scaring me. And he was scratching at my bedroom door. Really weird." She didn't say anything for several seconds, and when she did speak, her voice had no sleepiness in it at all. "What friend?" she said. "That fucking guy that was sleeping on the couch," I said. She was quiet again. "We didn't have any guys over," she said. "Call the police." My adrenaline surged and I told her to please lock the bedroom door as quickly as possible. I realized that I hadn't heard scratching in a while, and I had no clue where the dude had gone. Suddenly, I heard a loud banging in the other end of the house, where my roommates, Lauren and Monica, shared a bedroom. The bangs were followed by the sound of them screaming in fear. I quickly dialed the police as this maniac proceeded to bang against the, luckily, locked bedroom door of my 2 roommates as they screamed. The heaviness of the blows left no doubt that he was trying to break the door down. I had told the 911 operator the situation, and she'd dispatched 2 squad cars. The police in Isla Vista are generally used to peeling drunks off the sidewalk and breaking up brawling frat bros. This was really serious and strange, and I think the dispatcher got the sense from my tone how terrified I was, and she stayed on the phone with me. At one point, the banging stopped, and everything was quiet for a while. I talked with the dispatcher, and suddenly looked down to see that this guy had slipped his fingers through the 1-inch gap between my door and the floor, and was just kind of waggling them around, making this weird growling sound. I screamed and backed away, which is my biggest regret about this situation, since when I look back, it would have been so awesome to just stomp the shit out of those fingers and hear the guy howl in pain. When the cops rolled up, I heard running and the sound of our sliding glass door opening and closing, and then he was gone. The cops never caught him. He had broken in through our side door by jimmying the lock somehow. My door was covered in what turned out to be huge gauges he'd made, using a pair of scissors, which he discarded on the ground before he left. What terrifies me most about this was that I walked right past him. I looked him right in the face. I realize now that he was not trying to sleep or on drugs, but was lying so stiff like that because he was hiding. He probably heard me open the door and freaked out because he hadn't realized there was another girl living there and tried to blend into the couch in the darkness.
About 5 years ago, I lived downtown in a major city in the US. I've always been a night person, so I would often find myself bored after my roommate, who was decidedly not a night person, went to sleep. To pass the time, I used to go for long walks and spend the time thinking. I spent 4 years like that, walking alone at night, and never once had a reason to feel afraid. I always used to joke with my roommate that even the drug dealers in the city were polite. But all of that changed in just a few minutes of one evening. It was a Wednesday, somewhere between 1 and 2 in the morning, and I was walking near where the police patrolled the park quite a ways from my apartment. It was a quiet night, even for a weeknight, with very little traffic and almost no one on foot. The park, as it was most nights, was completely empty. I turned down a short side street in order to loop back to my apartment when I first noticed him. At the far end of the street, on my side, was the silhouette of a man, dancing. It was a strange dance, similar to a waltz, but he finished each box with an odd forward stride. I guess you could say he was dance-walking, headed straight for me. Deciding he was probably drunk, I stepped as close as I could to the road to give him the majority of the sidewalk to pass me by. The closer he got, the more I realized how gracefully he was moving. He was very tall and lanky, and wearing an old suit. He danced closer still, until I could make out his face. His eyes were open wide and wild, head tilted back slightly, looking off at the sky. His mouth was formed in a painfully wide cartoon of a smile. Between the eyes and the smile, I decided to cross the street before he danced any closer. I took my eyes off of him to cross the empty street. As I reached the other side, I glanced back, and then stopped dead in my tracks. He had stopped dancing and was standing with one foot in the street, perfectly parallel to me. He was facing me but still looking skyward, smile still wide on his lips. I was completely and utterly unnerved by this. I started walking again, but kept my eyes on the man. He didn't move. Once I had put about half a block between us, I turned away from him for a moment to watch the sidewalk in front of me. The street and sidewalk ahead of me were completely empty. Still unnerved, I looked back to where he had been standing to find him gone. For the briefest of moments, I felt relieved until I noticed him. He had crossed the street and was now slightly crouched down. I couldn't tell for sure due to the distance and the shadows, but I was certain he was facing me. I had looked away from him for no more than 10 seconds, so it was clear that he had moved fast. I was so shocked that I stood there for some time staring at him, and then he started moving toward me again. He took giant, exaggerated tiptoed steps, as if he were a cartoon character sneaking up on someone, except he was moving very, very quickly. I'd like to say at this point I ran away or pulled out my pepper spray or my cell phone or anything at all, but I didn't. I just stood there, completely frozen as the smiling man crept toward me. And then he stopped again, about a car length away from me, still smiling his smile, still looking to the sky. When I finally found my voice, I blurted out the first thing that came to mind. What I meant to ask was, "What the fuck do you want?" in an angry, commanding tone. What came out was a whimper. What the fu... Regardless of whether or not humans can smell fear, they can certainly hear it. I heard it in my own voice, and that only made me more afraid. But he didn't react to it at all. He just stood there, smiling. And then, after what felt like forever, he turned around very slowly and started dance-walking away. Just like that. Not wanting to turn my back to him again, I just watched him go, until he was far enough away to almost be out of sight. And then I realized something. He wasn't moving away anymore, nor was he dancing. I watched in horror as the distant shape of him grew larger and larger. He was coming back my way, and this time he was running. I ran too. I ran until I was off of the side road and back onto a better lit road with sparse traffic. Looking behind me then, he was nowhere to be found. The rest of the way home, I kept glancing over my shoulder, always expecting to see his stupid smile, but he was never there. I lived in that city for 6 months after that night, and I never went out for another walk. There was something about his face that always haunted me. He didn't look drunk, he didn't look high. He looked completely and utterly insane. And that's a very, very scary thing to see.
Be in the 4th grade, always hanging out with my friends Nathan, Josh, and Jose. One day the 4 of us decide to go to Nathan's parents' house. Across the street is a foreclosed house. We decide to explore the backyard because Nathan says, "There's a lot of cool stuff there, and one time I found a Playboy." Exploring the backyard on the promise of possibly finding cool stuff and seeing pictures. Jose discovers one of the windows to the house isn't sealed shut. Start talking about entering the house. We're all too chicken to go first. 2 more friends show up on skateboards. We convince them to go in on the promise that we've already entered and found money already. They go in, we follow. We all explore the house, breaking off into teams and searching around individually from time to time. This is a big house, probably 7 bedrooms type of big. Nathan and I decide to go upstairs. We end up finding a sealed room and forcing it open. Enter the room and find a bunch of candles, decayed small animals, jars filled with yellow and orange liquids. Instantly creeped out and found another room to explore. Searching alone and finding nothing worth mentioning, taking. Call out to Nathan, telling him I'm going downstairs. Nathan calls out saying, "Okay." Go downstairs to find Jose, Josh, and 2 others had left. Call out to Nathan and tell him they took off. Tell Nathan I'm leaving too. Nathan calls me up to check something cool he found. Stand at the foot of the stairs and tell him to bring it down and meet me outside. Start walking toward the window and notice it's been shut, and I can't get it open. Hear Nathan walking downstairs and ask him to hurry to help with the window. Hear a woman's screams upstairs. Force the window open with no help from Nathan and crawl out. Call out to Nathan and tell him, "Let's get out of here before someone catches us." No response or sight of Nathan. Think he's in trouble, so I run to his parents' house to get his dad. I knock on the door. Nathan answers, tells me, "I took off after you went into that other room. Realized 2 things that day. Something paranormal happened. My friends are assholes for ditching me."
I live in Anchorage, Alaska. A few years ago, I was driving from Anchorage to Fairbanks, which usually takes around 5 hours. There's a lot of trees and drops along the way. My girlfriend's mom was retelling an account she had several years before. She explained that she was making the same drive we were on, doped out on speed at like 3 in the morning. Dark, coming around a bend, sees an old bearded man in a wheelchair sitting at a small cutoff. There was no car, just a man in a wheelchair. He waved and that was it. Nope, nope, nope. Right after she finishes her story, we come around the bend and see the same man, in the same spot, and he waved. We all freaked out. I learned later something even worse. Her mom explained after that before the ride, the kids she was taking with her were complaining. One of them kept saying, "Stranger danger," and mentioned they were scared of the wheelchair man.
When I was a kid, I had a pretty bad home, so I spent a lot of time outside. One summer night when I was around 12 or 13, I was riding my bike around pretty late and came down through this wooded trail behind a street where a few businesses were. One of them was a pizza place. I biked to the spot where the trail met the rear parking lot and looked through a chain link fence to my left, into an isolated, dark, empty parking lot and saw a man lying on the ground, and death was kneeling over him. I saw his bony hands pressing against the man's chest, and as I stopped, he turned and looked at me. I saw the bottom of his pale white skull beneath his hood. As soon as he saw me, he lifted his scythe and flew into the woods behind the parking lot. I was terrified, but I wanted to make sure the man was okay, so I rode my bike around the pizza place to get to the other side of the chain-link fence. I got off and ran to the man. He wasn't moving. I ran into the pizza place and used their phone to call 911. A police car and then an ambulance showed up a few minutes later. Turns out the man on the ground was just some drunk guy who had passed out, and death was a local homeless tweaker who was pale as shit and was wearing a dark gray cloak. His scythe was just a walking stick that he carried around with him for protection. He came across the passed out guy, and instead of me interrupting him harvesting the man's soul, I interrupted him while he was looking for the man's wallet. The cops found him and brought him by so I could identify him. Between the dark and the fear, I had imagined all of the other details. Still, though, it's a true story, and it scared the shit out of me at the time.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more Greentext will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.